right, so just good morning, everyone. You are attending the Charge Ahead Colorado proposed deeded and assigned charging webinar today on March 24th. We did hold the first webinar last week on March 17th, but this is now just the second iteration, so same information. Let's go ahead and just review our agenda for today. So we are going to cover the Charge Ahead Colorado program, just provide a general overview, followed by the benefits and limitations of outlet charging, as well as how outlet charging can be utilized. And then we'll march right into the proposed DNA or deeded and assigned incentive, as well as the eligibility criteria and requirements, as well as how this incentive will work with Charge Ahead Colorado. And then we will end with a Q&A and public comment. So while we're presenting, feel free to utilize the Q&A function on your screen. We're pretty excited to hear your questions and feedback, especially as we focus on the eligibility criteria and requirements. So Charge Ahead Colorado is our longest running charging infrastructure grant program in the state. We've funded over 6,000 ports since 2014. This program is completely state funded. We do not utilize any federal funds, just state funding, and that is through DMV registration fees of electric vehicles and our community access enterprise. This enterprise was created along with two other transportation electrification enterprises in 2021 that are funded by a retail delivery fee for any deliveries placed in Colorado, placed by Colorado residents and rideshare. So Charge Ahead Colorado offers three application lanes, I should say. These are the standard and multifamily housing portfolio lanes offered in January, May, and September. These rounds are open about 4 weeks, and then we offer a rolling application for smaller level 2 port requests. So you can apply at any time during the year for these requests. All site types are eligible for funding with prioritization for multifamily housing, workplaces, and tourist destinations. The only exclusion is single-family homes and deeded and assigned parking, which we will get to in this webinar. So this is a map of our multifamily awards statewide. These are both active and completed that were awarded under Charge Ahead Colorado since 2014. So currently, for requirements, charging ports must be owned and operated by the grant recipient. Charging ports must be data capable and networked to fulfill the 5-year data reporting requirement. And these charging ports must have a dedicated parking space for electric vehicles. Along with that, all charging equipment must be UL certified. And for projects installing commercial level 2 ports, they must be 6 kilowatts or higher. And then lastly, charging ports required by any state, local, or regional building codes are ineligible for funding unless projects are installing in excess of codes. So if local code is requiring 2 ports, but a project is deciding to install 4 ports, then we'll fund 2 out of the 4. And then lastly, just a little bit more on that deeded and assigned piece. So currently under the program, charging for deeded and assigned parking stalls are not eligible under Charge Ahead Colorado. And that creates quite a large gap at multifamily properties. Right now, only shared parking is eligible for Charge Ahead funding, and commercial level 2 stations must be installed. In addition to deeded and assigned parking being ineligible, outlets are also thereby ineligible as well. And we're talking about both the 120 and 240 volt outlets. But again, we'll get to that. So what is outlet charging? But before we get to that, let me run a very quick poll. Do that. Let's just launch. So, question that we have for all of you today is, do you have experience with outlet charging? Just give it a couple more seconds. Right. Oh, another straggler. Right, I'm gonna end that poll. All right, so pretty interesting. It is about pretty split with folks that have used outlet charging versus those who haven't. Thanks for participating. Just love to have a nice little icebreaker on this. Um, Stop. Get back to the presentation. All right. So what is outlet charging? So we have two examples here. On the left is a level two charging station that I'm sure most folks are familiar with or have seen at multifamily workplaces, shopping centers, or other places that we tend to dwell for longer. The way our office is categorizing the power level for for Charge Ahead Colorado is any station operating at 240 volts or 6 kilowatts or higher. So this photo on the right is a great example of what outlet charging is. This is often referred to as level one charging. In this case, the driver is using a 120 volt outlet that they plug their cable into. Outlet charging is a bring your own cable situation where your electric vehicle either comes with the cable when you purchase or lease it, or you can purchase it as an accessory. In my case, my EV came with it. Outlets can also operate at 240 volts, which is where level two charging station starts to operate at. Outlets can charge at the level two power output, but that's where the terminology starts to get very confusing. So in this case, and for the sake of this webinar, we're just going to refer to this type of charging as just, or where we use a wall plug as just outlet charging. So outlet charging requires a NEMA rated plug. And from this image, we can see a variety of plugs that it's a pretty great visual of, how many NEMA rated plugs there are out there, right? In North America. Um, and 120 volt outlets are going to use that standard NEMA 515 or 520 plug type, which you'll often see in your home, sometimes in the exterior of your house or in a garage. So think of the plug that you're using to plug in like a hair dryer or a toaster. Um, and so this is a slow charge that we're talking about. So often charging 2 to 5 miles each hour when your EV is plugged in. This is a great option for plug-in hybrid electric vehicles or for overnight charging or whenever you're spending long periods at home. So say, for my case, I work from home most of the time. So that is such a great use case of just having a slow trickle charge. Um, the 240 volt outlets have a bigger selection of amps and plug types. This is what you are often using for a dryer, particularly that NEMA 1450 plug or possibly the 1430 plug. And this is where we're going to get a much faster charge. So, but of course, not as fast as a commercial level two, but definitely faster than a 120 volt outlet. And you're getting upwards of 15 miles per hour if you're using an outlet that is operating at 30 amps. Not in all cases, but in some cases. For the purpose of this webinar, though, we're going to focus on outlets that are under this red bracket. So 30 amps or 5.76 kilowatts or under. So over the year, we've been collecting data, researching, and connecting with stakeholders to learn more about outlet charging and multifamily needs. We've also cataloged the experiences of previous multifamily outreach and charge ahead grantees, which informs this proposed incentive and pilot. These are some of the notable barriers highlighted from our summaries. Electrical capacity and upgrades is this first one. It is quite common, something that we frequently hear, especially for getting commercial level two stations at multifamily properties. Properties are often facing issues with existing capacity that require panel upgrades, possibly even a new transformer or line extensions to ensure that there is enough power to provide charging access. And this ties in pretty well with financial constraints. And, that just includes the overall cost burden of getting charging stations installed, as well as costs for repairs and maintenance and subscriptions to networking to manage station use. So these costs are also influenced by parking outlets, of course. So, whether it's existing or new construction, things like parking garages versus surface lots or where the panel is in relation to the lot Even whether the available parking is shared or assigned can make a big difference in the decision making for multifamily grantees that we see under Charge Ahead. We're also finding that property managers and residents need something a lot more straightforward when it comes to charging. Charging stations often require a pretty good degree of education, including how to operate and maintain the stations, who to contact, even who to reach out to just for fixing the stations or how to even use them properly. I mean, whether we want to admit it or not, so this is a new technology for a lot of people, and it does require a bit of a learning curve to make sure that people are utilizing stations correctly. And this also extends to tenants as well, multifamily residents. So they also feel a similar strain when using stations, and they're often having to download a plethora of apps just to add a credit card or begin their session. So to alleviate the burden multifamily properties face, it's important to share technology types that go beyond the commercial level two charging ports by introducing benefits of outlet charging. From our research and engagement, outlets are overall much cheaper compared to their commercial level two counterparts. And some of these reasons are attributed to this as less of a need to do significant electrical upgrades to the property. There is simpler wiring, and outlets mostly require less electrical loads compared to level two installs. And keyword mostly, not all the time, but most of the time. Outlets are a great option because they are expanding access to charging at multifamily properties that have been unable to adopt charging. Downtown Denver and other parts of Colorado that have been unable to expand charging that are in denser areas are really great examples. Sometimes they do lack transformer space or need significant panel upgrades to make charging a reality for their residents. Uh, Outlets also offer pretty good scalability, so perhaps a property isn't ready for level two charging because of capacity or financial reasons, but they're able to install outlets in the interim because um, that way residents can still use them. And so then when that property is ready to do an upgrade, they could eventually upgrade to level two stations in the future. And then lastly, outlets are pretty straightforward. You just plug in the cable and the other end is in your EV, and that's pretty much it. No apps, no configuration, whether you want to or not. Again, EV charging can be complicated quite quickly, and we want to ensure that multifamily residents can see themselves charging at home, and just another part of their everyday routine. So, that being said, while there's a benefit, there's also a limitation. Unsurprisingly, 120-volt outlets are slower compared to charging through a 240-volt outlet. And a 240-volt outlet operating at 30 amps or less is also, quite slow compared to level two charging station. Outlets might not support the daily needs of drivers, especially those that have daily or very long commutes. And outlets, while cost effective, are not a great solution in all parking settings. So shared or guest parking would definitely struggle with outlet charging when these are meant to be shorter dwell times for drivers. Oops, there we go. So with that, we do want to highlight where outlet charging makes the most sense, and that is deeded and assigned parking. This segment of multifamily has often been overlooked, especially as many programs tend to focus more on the shared charging aspect. Uh, Deeded and assigned stalls or DNA stalls are a great option to electrify because we're ensuring that residents will have a dedicated source to charge when they come home. This also ensures, longer dwell time, so matching behaviors to charging as well. So things like overnight charging, that is a perfect example of how residents can get the most out of their outlet. We also have to assume that, most folks are spending their evenings and overnight at home. So again, aligning charging behaviors with overnight behaviors is great and optimal. It also sets an expectation that once a driver is plugged in for the night at their spot, that's it. They're not having to get up and move their vehicle like some residents would if there's a time limit or a shared charger. And then just circling back to the barriers properties face, multifamily properties can benefit from outlet charging without having to incur significant costs. And they would no longer need to remain stuck on the question on feasibility, really. So, right. So this is the moment you've been waiting for. The proposed DNA incentive. So this is what will be in addition to what Charge Ahead Colorado already offers. Um, So our office will offer the incentive for all application lanes, so the standard, the multifamily housing portfolio, and rolling. The difference, though, between the DNA incentive and the other level two and DC fast charging incentives is that networking is optional in this case. Charge Ahead has historically required 5 years of networking to collect session data to understand the usage. But because the intended user here is a multifamily residence, with DNA stalls, we can already assume a lot here about who is using the outlets. But that being said, if properties do wish to monitor use through whether a smart outlet or have them network, they are able to do that still using the incentive. So just moving on to this power level column here. So the power level will be limited to 120 to 240 volt outlets operating at 5.7 kilowatts or less. And so we'll speak a little bit more about this in the requirements and eligible costs section. And then after, assessing costs and summaries for outlet installations, we've reached the incentive per outlet to be $1,250. And then income qualified housing will have an enhanced incentive of $1,750 per outlet. So the proposed eligible applicants, of course, are going to be multifamily property owners or property managers, homeowner associations of apartments and condominiums, and then income qualified housing is eligible as well. We highly encourage income qualified housing to apply. Third-party vendors installing outlets on behalf of multifamily properties and local housing authorities are also going to be eligible to use the incentive. So for income qualified housing properties to qualify for that enhanced incentive of $1,750 per outlet, they would need to meet the same qualifications that are already required under Charge Ahead Colorado, which is providing documentation verifying either participating in any one of the following income qualified or affordable housing programs, or documentation showing that at least 50% of current or future residents have a household income of 80% or less of the county's area median income, or AMI. So of course, there are ineligible applicants and criteria as well. So ineligible uses of the incentive include shared parking lots, which we will ask project managers to install commercial grade level 2 charging stations in those cases. Single family homes are also ineligible, as well as individual multifamily residents. So for proposed eligibility criteria. So to submit an application for this DNA incentive, applicants must meet the following criteria here. So properties, income qualified and market rate, even luxury, they must be multifamily housing, and we will not accept any requests of any other site type. So multifamily only. But to be categorized as multifamily housing, they must meet the state definition of being 5 units or more in a single structure. We did have an interesting question at last week's webinar of, well, what if it is multiple, buildings on one single property, and each property has, like maybe 5 or less units. That still counts because it's one property with multiple buildings. And so the other requirement as well as that is that projects must install outlets at a minimum of 20% of deeded and assigned parking stalls. So if you have 100 stalls that are deeded and assigned, 20% of them must have outlets to participate. However, if a property has 10 housing units or less, then 100% of those parking stalls are required to have outlet installations. And remember, these are proposed. We will provide, finalized version next month. Then As for eligible costs, they're going to be quite similar to what already exists under Charge Ahead Colorado, but I'm going to call out the eligible costs that are specific to the outlets. So equipment needs to be NEMA rated, and they need to be within the range of the NEMA 515 outlet up to the maximum output offered in a NEMA 1430 outlet. So we're not allowing anything higher than 1430 because anything greater than 5.7 kilowatts will not be eligible for funding. And this is because in Charge Ahead for commercial level 2 stations, they need to be a minimum of 6 kilowatts or higher. Um, Networking and data plans are an optional cost if properties choose to install smart or networked outlets. If properties do decide they want to opt out of networking, but they still would like to monitor use for billing purposes, per se, or just overall, energy usage, smart panels are an optional eligible cost as well. In terms of what is ineligible, portable charging cords, resident-owned outlets, costs incurred outside of the agreement dates or outlets that have already been installed at DNA deeded and assigned stalls, electricity costs, and any uh, any O&M contracts or costs, they will not be eligible for funding under this incentive or the program. So, of course, there's still requirements for this grant. Outlets are, easier to maintain, but just as a note, we are requiring grantees to ensure availability to tenants with DNA stalls. If something does happen to the outlet, we want to ensure that properties are proactive, whether, maintaining the equipment themselves or having a third party manage the outlets. In this first year of the pilot, we are going to be requiring annual surveys to ensure that outlets are operational. So just asking, just overall usage, are tenants actually using them? Do they see an increase of EV drivers? Just more of a simple survey, really. And then our office will then determine if we will require the annual survey in the following year. If properties are networking, then we will require them to report their data sessions to Colorado Energy Office. Right. Then there's this question of, well, what about what about properties that already have shared parking in addition to deeded and assigned stalls? So the good news is that we are proposing the following. Applicants can apply for the DNA incentive and the level two commercial station in the same application if they want to. So you can take advantage of both incentives, or one or the other. It's totally up to the business purpose of the multifamily property. We do recognize that properties have very varied parking styles. So we're suggesting the below variations of how to utilize the incentive. If parking is deeded and assigned, then they should be installing outlets. If a property has, shared visitor or public parking, then those commercial level 2 ports are going to be most appropriate. So if you're more visual like me, this is a chart of the DNA incentive with how it will interact with the charge ahead application lanes and their requirements. And so this incentive can be used with multifamily housing portfolio lane. But for folks that are not familiar with the portfolio lane, in order to use it, applicants must apply with a minimum of 3 properties. And so applicants can choose to apply for the outlets, level 2 ports, or both under this application. Again, up to the business purpose and plan of the property. But let's say if your application has fewer than 3 properties, that's totally fine. If you do not have 3 properties, you can still submit an application under the standard lane. And so the standard application also will allow for the mixed use of level 2 commercial ports and outlets. But let's say if a property actually wants to use the rolling application, and this allows applicants to apply at any point during the year. Well, you can only apply for either or, not an and situation. So applicants must only apply for outlets or level 2. And this is due to the anticipated maximum grant award of 42,000. So we can't exceed that due to the fact that level two. So if a request is installing level two ports only, six level two ports is the maximum you can request because that is 42,000. A maximum amount of outlets in the situation under $42,000 is 24 outlets. So it's either or. So so just to recap, if you want to apply for both outlets and level two stations, you would either use the standard or the multifamily housing portfolio app. If you're only applying for level two or only applying for outlets, then the rolling application will be your best friend. So with those proposed incentives, we do want to shout out some important considerations for multifamily applicants. Project managers or properties should think about the anticipated costs associated with labor and construction based on whether they're going to be installing in parking garages or surface lots. New construction or existing properties also have their own scenarios to work through. So we encourage, proactivity in siting and panel location and other considerations that impact those costs. Parking layout should also be, a little light bulb moment on how to best maximize charge ahead funds and whether properties benefit from outlets only, from level two stations only, or a mixture of both. So we went through a lot of information. Thankfully, we're on this last slide here. So we are looking to pilot the DNA incentive in May 2026 during the standard and multifamily housing portfolio round of Charge Ahead Colorado. That launch date is going to be May 11th, and we'll have more information on that. Before that round opens, we will be holding a webinar just to answer questions about the program and provide a finalized overview of the pilot. And then for announcements on the round opening and webinar, we encourage you to sign up to our Charge Ahead Colorado mailing list just so you can get all of our program announcements. We won't spam you, we promise. Just, critical information that the applicants and interested parties need to know. We also want to highlight the Recharge Colorado program. This is a free resource where applicants can get some coaching and support as they work through the application process. They're a great resource, especially during the open application rounds, as Colorado Energy Office staff, such as myself and Mika, who's also on the webinar. We're unable to take questions during open rounds, but Recharge coaches will be able to. Then lastly, if there are any providers that offer outlets, smart panels, or EVEMS, or electric vehicle energy management systems, or general multifamily housing support, we would love for you to fill out this general interest form to catalog vendors that work in this space. So with that, we can go ahead and do Q&A. So saw some questions pop up.